Alright, I'm back. I know this isn't exactly a video everyone wants, but don't worry, I'm going to be catching up on my TV reviews fairly quickly, but I wanted to try something else out because I figured this out. Before, when I reviewed comics, for some reason, my video capture software never wanted to capture photos when I put them up, just still photos. If you put up just still photo, it would just go black. The whole screen would just go black. But I managed to get a program working that will capture photos. Also, my video editing software wouldn't let me control the speed of transitions on still photos with my board. Well, there was a way, but when I tried to do it this way before, it took me around 5 hours in editing to do a single look, and yeah, with my schedule, that's not really going to work. But anyway, I'm back because I can sit in a chair without extreme pain anymore. And anyway, we're going to continue our look at Spider-Girl, and I'm just gonna call this a recap. It's not really an in-depth review. I've realized that what I do with comics isn't really an in-depth review. At least I don't think so. So, yeah. Oh, and quick note, if it seems to jump around a bit, it's because there are at least 2 or 3 pages missing from the scans that I got. So, yeah, sorry about that. It's far from perfect, but it's getting more professional. So that's something, anyway. Okay, as you can see, this is Spider-Girl issue number 1, or as it puts it, the first stunning issue with a cover date of October 1998. So we're a bit early for the 20th anniversary, because you demanded it, the wildest and cutest web swinger of all. Daughter of a true Spider-Man. I wonder if that's Tom DeFalco making his feelings felt about the Clone Saga, which he had to write, which, as I gather, he didn't want to write. Or at least he was forced to write it, stretch it out longer than he had ever intended, and he didn't intend for Mary Jane to miscarry. So he was like, screw it, I'm just gonna tell what I think of him on the cover. So yeah, we have a missing cover. It recaps the fact that Mayday just discovered that she has spider powers inherited from Peter. The third Green Goblin, Norby Osborn, tried to kill him. He had lost his leg in a confrontation he had with the original Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, who had kidnapped May as a baby. So between his losing his leg and nearly losing his family to the Green Goblin, he sort of soured on the whole superhero thing, and shortly after May was born, and so he and MJ aren't too hot on the idea of her being a superhero. And there's an interesting dynamic here, because she's not just rebellious and say, oh, I'm going to do it because I know it's the right thing to do. She actually isn't 100% sure it's the right thing to do. She wants to do it, and she believes it's her responsibility because that's the way Mary Jane and Peter raised her. However, she understands their concerns and knows that they have a responsibility to keep her safe because she's still a minor, and so there's this push and pull aspect to it that's interesting, and that's more complex than what you get in your average comic book. So anyway, she gets to school after another couple of missing pages. She gets to school, and Moose from the football team did a prank on Jimmy Yuma, the nerd who's a friend of Mayday's, and I'm going to be calling her Mayday throughout this review because her name may be May, and it may refer, and a lot of people may refer to her as that in the comic, but I just find it too confusing when you call her May, because there already is a May Parker in the Spider-Man universe. She may be dead at this point, but still. And anyway, things are boiling over, and it looks like there's going to be a fight. Brad, some guy May has a crush on, broke up a fight, but yeah, yeah, it's kind of upsetting, but it also is it's pretty tame for a high school prank. I mean, all I did was put a bucket of water up there. seems like coming to blows is a little over the top. She goes to visit her father during lunch, which I don't know. I don't know. I didn't go to public school. Are kids really allowed to just walk out of a public high school during lunch? Are they really allowed to do that? That seems unrealistic. Like, the way that they always portray police as just running errands, personal errands, and checking up on things without checking in with their captain or anything on TV. Like, you know they're not allowed to do that. They have to clock in and clock out the same as everybody else. But she doesn't find him. Instead, she finds a guy she calls Uncle Phil, but he's not really her uncle. He's really the nephew of... his real name is Phil Urich, and he's the nephew of Ben Urich, who is a reporter in the Marvel comic universe. And if you don't remember him from that, you probably remember him if you saw the show Daredevil. Yeah, he was kind of important in Daredevil. So yeah, and here Ben she cons him into thinking that she's writing a paper on the history of Spider-Man because she wants to know more about Spider-Man, and Peter isn't exactly being very forthcoming, not wanting to encourage her to do the whole masked hero thing. Again, it comes from Peter's sense of responsibility. It seems a little unreasonable, but then when you consider everything that he's lost because of this life and because of the spider powers, you can see why he wouldn't want to encourage May to use them. But he talks about how a few dozen books have been written about Spider-Man, which makes sense because it's been almost 2 decades since he stopped being Spider-Man. So if you consider that maybe he had a decade and a half as Spider-Man, and that would still put him, even if it was a decade and a half as Spider-Man, and about a decade and a half since he stopped being Spider-Man, that puts him in his mid-40s, and yeah, that seems to be the way he's drawn. So in this comic, and I like Peter's design. It's somewhat reminiscent, but yeah, I'll talk about Peter's design when I get to it. But anyway, talks about how he's pieced together that it was probably a freak accident and that Spider-Man started out in show business, but then he could have stopped a burglar. The police, know that, and then and then he seems to have gone after a burglar because the burglar killed somebody that he cared about. It's like, as I recall, Spidey had a special say, which went something like, with great power, yada yada, great responsibility. The yada yada was either there should come or there must come. I like must come because it's more of an imperative, yeah, I think that's the way it goes. And anyway, I love this how it shows that there is a connection between May and Peter here, and it's just like a wave of compassion sweeps over you as you try to imagine the guilt your poor father must have carried, and May still bear to this very day. And this gives her two things. One, it tells her that somebody could be hurt if she doesn't use her powers, but on the other hand, it shows her just how her father would feel if she does get hurt using her powers. So it doesn't help solve her crisis at all. And it shows that there isn't an easy answer to this. That is all right or all wrong. Okay, here's something is that I can't remember if she was ever revealed to have some sort of powers, but Peter comes in and he interrupts him with his Captain Rules. And I'm not going to complain about that name because it feels like a 90s Stan Lee name to me. If Stan Lee was still writing in the 90s, that's the sort of name he would have come up with. Captain Rules, the head of the police. But he had to spell with a Z because in the 90s everything had to be extreme. So you had to replace the boring old S's with Z's, of course. But look at Captain Rules. I was always under the impression Peter was supposed to be somewhere around 6 feet tall. For anyone, not just a woman, for anyone, Captain Rules is huge. I mean, just look at the way she dwarfs Peter. He looks like he's in his 40s, and I like his design. It's sort of reminiscent of Tony Stark, actually, and it shows that maybe Tony Stark had an influence on him because as he gets middle aged, he's looking more and more like Tony Stark. But it's just hilarious. I mean, if you just look at where Peter's head is, and it just barely comes up to her chin, and she's just so much bulkier than him. He looks like a teenager. I don't know if they did that on purpose or what, but this panel where they're just standing like right next to each other always makes me laugh because all of a sudden Peter looks like he's tiny, like he's 14 or something. It's hilarious. He has a meeting with the district attorney, so he has to blow her off. When she gets outside, and he tells her to head back to school, and but May's spider sense goes off, and she notices a guy, helps her zero in on a guy and she's discovering all her powers. So she just calls it a strange tingling at this point because she's still getting used to having these powers, and Peter isn't exactly helping her. And that gets addressed in later issues. But for now, the major conflict is that Peter and MJ really don't want her doing this because they've both lost too much to it. But it helps her zero in on a guy who's following him. Peter and they're going to meet Assistant District Attorney Yama, who's a relation of Jimmy Yama from a previous page. But May grabs him, and I love this. She just puts a trash can over him. She doesn't want to get caught, so she puts a trash can over his head and just bags him around until he sits. She thinks she needs to get back to English Lit, but then when she sees him going, she decides to follow him and find out why he was trailing her dad, and she follows him to a closed up clothing store. Then meets her. If anybody could tell me in the comments, because I've never come across this name, it's David with just an A tacked on. I guess Davida, Davida. I guess Davida is how I'm gonna say her friend's name. Davida. Is talking to her. She thinks she skipped out to be with Brad, but of course, her name is of course a tribute to Jack Kirby, Davida Kirby, yeah, and used to love. And this shows another conflict in her life. Used to love the thrill of the game. Even fantasized about winning a college scholarship, and eventually taking a shot at pros. But that was before everything changed. As they say on Babylon 5, everything changed. And Davida tries to tells her that she's going to be going to the mall with Moose and Brad, and that doesn't seem to make Jimmy happy over there. But, yeah. Your ambivalence about basketball quickly evaporates in the heat of practice. Even as your teammates try to shut you down, you surrender to your spider sense, weaving, almost dancing past them. And for the briefest of moments, you're back in your happiest of zones, feeling loose and slamming heat. But once you've returned to Earth, you realize this isn't fair, isn't right. Whoa, this girl's got game. As for the rest of you, you're going to keep practicing until everyone hits Parker's level. And of course that puts her off and makes everyone mad at her. And that yeah, Flash Thompson, by the way, that he's the coach of her basketball team. So that's Flash Thompson, and yeah, but she's conflicted because it isn't fair because she's got powers that she's using to dodge everyone. So, and she's got the agility and the spider sense, and of course that's shaken her. And she doesn't feel like she could talk to her parents, which I like that they show that the Parkers do have a happy family, but they could still make mistakes in this very confusing issue. So Peter and MJ have made a huge mistake of that. She feels that she can't talk to them about this. So she finds out her dad is working a case about that revolves around the fashion industry and a string of murders tied to it. And that may sound far-fetched, mobsters murdering people over clothes, but there was a guy who lived around me who apparently got beheaded because he crossed the mob in a counterfeit jean racket. Yeah, counterfeit jeans. There's things that you can get for $10 to $20 in Walmart. Apparently, there's money in counterfeiting them and enough for somebody to decide to cut your head off if you cross them in that racket. So Peter thought he had destroyed all his. So she's now worried that the mob is following her dad, who, of course, is missing a leg. She really gets caught by MJ. Peter thought he destroyed all his Spider-Man stuff, including his cartridges and web shooters, which Sheeta can't make her own yet. She's not the technical genius Peter was. She's a genius enough to be a straight-A student, but she's also a basketball star, and that's one of her things. But she's not the technical genius Peter is. And but I like this idea that Peter was Spider-Man for so long, and he has so much stuff that he squirreled away that around here that he could not notice that she squirreled away some web cartridges and some stuff. And of course, she's fresh back in. She doesn't have a Spider-Man suit. She doesn't have a Spider-Girl suit, old Spider-Man suit like she did in the last issue. So she just has on. A fit, a ski mask and some old gym clothes, which I don't know what time period this is supposed to be, but those gym clothes look like they came from Tron or the original Battlestar Galactica. She's trying to convince herself that she's only doing this to protect her father, but yeah, it shows that she knows. And one of the things that I like about the second person narration is once you get used to it, it really gets you into Mayday's head. And so she goes to the store. She finds a guy plead with a guy. I followed him just like you said, and somebody jumped me. Who would do such a terrible thing, Shaky? Maybe you shouldn't have given the assassination job to a guy named Shaky. I don't know. They disappeared on me. Disappeared? You could surely do better than that, Shaky. Disappearing is my specialty. And I would hate to think that anyone would have the nerve to copy me. I wouldn't. I lie to you, nobody. I swear I wouldn't. Yeah, Mr. Nobody, I'm sure you have a copyright on dressing in black and disappearing on people in comic books and even in the Marvel universe. That's just such an original shtick. I'm sure you can claim a copyright on it. Hey, boss, some crazy ninja is spying on you. Careless May. Next time you really should pay more attention to your spider sense. And this shows that she got a lot of learning to do and why it would be better for Peter to trade her. She's jumping around and Mr. Nobody can teleport. Please, she's only a well-trained athlete and hardly a match for Mr. Nobody. Where did you come from? Don't insult my intelligence, young woman. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know about my ability to teleport. My, look at our ego. And Mr. Nobody shoots his own goons trying to get her. Meanwhile, Raoul's calls Peter to tell him that they've been watching this building and now there are gunshots coming from it, so she's probably going to need the crime lab there in a little bit. And pages are missing that show how Mr. Nobody was defeated, but basically she uses her spider sense to zero in on him as he teleports and hits him just as he teleports. Captain Rose and what looks like the entire NYPD show up, and so she bounces out, try to arrest her, and she bounces out of there. Phil lets it slip back. The crooks are talking about some lady ninja attacking him. That causes Peter to rush out because he suspects that it's May. Phil finds webbing, which he decides not to turn in for reasons of his own. Mr. Nobody reports the Kingpin, who is in prison. I'm assuming this must be Wilson Fisk's son or grandson, since Wilson Fisk couldn't possibly be alive at this point. You hear the footsteps slowly approaching, and you bury even deeper into your covers. What can you say to him? How can you possibly explain your actions? The subject of Spider-Girl has been actively avoided ever since you first discovered your powers. But you know your parents well enough to guess her stand on you becoming a costume crime fighter, on you risking your life. You steel yourself for a bitter argument, which thankfully never comes. It may still loom in your future, but you're safe right now. So she climbed under covers, and Peter bought that she was, or he's pretending to buy that she wasn't. The book isn't very clear on that. Funny how things worked out. Your father became the hero because somebody died. Thanks to your actions, your father will live. There's a lot to be said for being proactive. Yeah, there is. It's an idea that comforts and carries you through the days which follow, days filled with secrets and subterfuge, drudgery and frustration, clandestine acts, and momentous decisions. In the end, you are still plagued by doubts, questions, and countless insecurities. All you know for sure is that your name is Mayday Parker, and at least for the foreseeable future, you are also the stunning Spider-Girl. The beginning. This issue is pretty good. It doesn't have the emotional weight of the first issue, but of issue 0, because there isn't all that backstory. But at the same time, it helps further establish characters, and it helps establish what the early running conflict in May's life is going to be. And like Peter, she's going to be hiding what she's doing from her parental figure, but this time it's for a completely different set of reasons. And yet, as I said so many times in the review, it sets her up doing her own thing without her coming off as trying to be openly rebellious or even disdainful of her parents' advice and their concerns. She understands them, she just doesn't agree with them, and she feels like she doesn't have any other choice. And we see that it comes from her sense of responsibility to her family and to her community, and her heroism comes from the way. It's funny that Peter and MJ are trying to stop her because it's the way that they raised her that's giving her this sense of responsibility in the first place. Mr. Nobody is a villain that I like, and he sets up a distinct villain for her to fight in that will be in her own rogue gallery. So yeah, all in all, it's low key, but it's also pretty good. So I give this one a 8 out of 10. And yeah, we will be continuing to look at Spider-Girl comics throughout the run of this series. I'm going to be alternating between Spider-Girl, Spider-Man, and probably some point Super Sons comics at some point throughout the run of my show on YouTube, and I hope you enjoy that. But yeah, next we'll be getting back to reviewing movies and TV shows, so stick around for that.